In the United States, 30 to 40% of the food supply is estimated to be wasted. That's like going to the grocery store, purchasing 10 Greek yogurts, and then only ever eating 6 or 7 of them. In America, about $640 of food is wasted every year per household. That's a lot of money. Instead of buying store-brand cereal or like knockoffs, you could have been eating those real Lucky Charms. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. The purpose of today's video is to give us all some food for thought about food waste and how it's actually a bigger problem than a lot of people think it is. There's actually a lot more to your food than just going to the grocery store and then cooking it up at home for dinner. So let's start with, how do you get the food? So how do we get the food? It's grown somewhere. How do we grow the food somewhere? We need to add a lot of inputs. We need to get water to it. We need the land. We need people. We need big tractors. We need lots of fossil fuel. We have to harvest it, and we have to figure out how to get it from point A to B, which means some sort of packaging and even more transportation. Then once it's at point B, say the grocery store, then we go pick it up, bring it home, cook it. We're familiar with this part. But what happens after you're done with it? After you've thrown it out and disposed of it in whatever way you normally do? Like, it's out of sight, out of mind. So there are 3 main things that happen when you dispose of your food afterwards. It either gets, best case scenario, composted, or sent to a landfill, or burned. When it goes into landfill, it stays there and rots and creates this leachate that we have to pay to treat. And you're thinking, how much of the landfill can actually be food waste? It's 20%. So this 20% of the landfill is taking up space, and we have to pay to treat it. And when we don't manage to treat it properly, it ends up becoming a contaminant and can pollute the groundwater tables underneath it, or can run off into surface waters and then create other environmental problems. And in the long term, it can end up killing plants and other biota. Depending on where you live, municipal waste goes into either a landfill or it gets burned. When it gets burned, it gets turned into this ash that has to go somewhere still, and this smoke of smog that you don't want to interact with because of all the plastic chemicals and everything that go into the air with it. But the food also still turns into different kinds of greenhouse gases like NOx and CO2, and that's just another part of a global warming issue. So we're going to discuss 3 problems that are amplified by food waste. When plants are growing, they have their roots in the ground, and they're uptaking nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. So when these nutrients are taken out of the ground, it's kind of hard to get them back. And that can be a problem when you're growing food in the same plot of land season after season, year after year. It ends up being depleted of the nutrients. So by wasting food that was grown from these nutrients, you're wasting these nutrients in the ground, and the amount of food that gets from this plot of land to people's mouths is less than it could have been. So when these nutrients are in the ground, it's a great thing because they're growing plants, and everyone loves plants because it means they can eat. So nutrients are great in the ground, but when nutrients are not in the ground and they're traveling around on land, in the air, and in the surface water, they become a pollutant, and that's not great. So I know you're thinking nitrogen, 70% of the atmosphere, N2 is fine. When it's NO3 or NO2, that's when we start having problems because it is a greenhouse gas. But also, it gets deposited into surface waters from the atmosphere, and it gets deposited into the surface waters from running off over land. And in the surface waters, these nutrients feed algae, and these algae can grow and grow at these rapid rates and then die and decompose and take up the oxygen in the ponds, and then all of a sudden there's no oxygen left and fish start dying, and these algae that have been growing produce these bacteria called cyanobacteria, and cyanobacteria produce cyanotoxins that are harmful to our livers and our kidneys and cause death in people and pets. And when these cyanotoxins are produced, it leads to drinking water treatment plants being shut down and people being told not to drink their tap water. So when we deplete our grounds of nutrients by over-farming and wasting the food, and then add nutrients back onto the farms to keep growing, and these nutrients that are looser and not in the ground run off, end up being a problem. There are going to be a lot more mouths to feed soon. Currently, there's 7.3 billion people in the world, and that is expected to be 9.7 by 2050. If in America, our country is wasting 30 to 40% of its food, how do we expect to keep up with these increases in people when we're depleting our land of nutrients and having a harder time growing food in the first place? Something to think about. So here are some things that you can do and to help you be a little more mindful about food waste. Take less each serving, so that way you can finish what's on your plate and then go back and get more if you're hungry. This way, you can become a member of the Clean Plate Club. Try to practice meal planning. That way you can make sure you cook enough, but not too much. So if you're someone that finds you have leftovers that you're not eating very often, try to reassess exactly how many ingredients you're putting in. Date your food when you buy it. That way you know how old it is and you're not just wondering and throwing away stuff that's only 4 days old that you thought was from a week and a half ago. You can avoid putting your food into the garbage can in the first place by composting. Some cities and towns even have a compost pickup, so just participating in local programs like that can be amazing. If you want to see more on this topic, I linked a video in the description from Rob Greenfield, and he biked across the country and he only ate food that was locally grown. He has a lot of good information about food waste and also where your food comes from in general, and I really recommend checking him out. Let me know in the comments your thoughts and reactions. Be sure to check out some of my other videos if you're interested in learning more about our environment, and thanks for watching. Have a nice day.